We are once again together to read Money, Power, and Sex, the Lori Daybell trial by juror number 18, Tom Evans. We're about halfway through the book right now, and I'm really loving the comments. Thank you all for giving me your feedback and thanking me for reading this. I really am enjoying this, and I hope that you're getting something out of it. Perhaps a little justice through understanding. So let's move forward. We're now on chapter 12. Who was Alex Cox? Who was Lori Daybell's brother Alex Cox, and how did he become Chad and Lori Daybell's hitman? We know he was allegedly involved in the murder of Lori's ex-husband Charles Vallow. We know he was involved in the murders of Chad Daybell's wife Tammy, his niece Tylee, and his nephew JJ. We also know that earlier he was involved in the attempted murders of Chad Daybell's wife Tammy and allegedly Brandon Boudreaux, and convicted for the tasering of Joe Ryan. But how does one become a cold-blooded killer like Alex? How does an uncle so brutally murder his 16-year-old niece and 7-year-old nephew? Was Alex a serial killer? I know this is out of chronological order, but I want to talk about Alex's death first. The circumstances around his death are suspicious to me and just a little weird. According to the medical examiner's report, he died of blood clots in his lungs and high blood pressure at the age of 51 on December 12th of 2019. And his death happened to occur just one day after Tammy Daybell's body was exhumed on December 11th of 2019. But why is that significant? By the time police decided that Tammy's death was suspicious, they were starting to suspect Chad and Lori and Alex. If Alex was dead, he wouldn't be able to tell police of Chad and Lori's involvement, and Chad and Lori would be able to pin the murder on Alex. The police report regarding Alex's death is highly redacted, but it does call the place of Alex's death a crime scene. Why? Was that procedure, or did they have some reason to be suspicious? By the time of Alex's death, the police were looking for Tylee and JJ and was questioning the death of Charles Vallow and the attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell and Brandon Boudreaux. So yes, they were suspicious. Another thing that's weird to me is that Alex's new wife, Zulema, while at work, had called her son Joseph Lopez, who was at home, asking him to check on Alex. Why would she do that? Joseph was an unemployed 25-year-old living in the basement of Zulema and Alex's house, but he hardly knew his stepfather, Alex, and had almost no contact with him prior to finding him lying on the bathroom floor, covered in his own vomit, struggling to breathe. Joseph is the one who called 911. The 911 operator tried to get Joseph to administer CPR, but he wouldn't do it. Why would Zulema want to check on him? Did she have some reason to think he was in trouble? How could she have known something was wrong? Maybe she did know, which would certainly implicate her in his death. It's too coincidental to me to believe that Alex and Joe Ryan died of heart complications, both of being young, healthy men. Is there some drug that is hard to trace that was used to kill them? I know police might not have had reason to be too suspicious about Joe Ryan's death, but by the time Alex died, they were very suspicious. Also, once they had become suspicious, they reopened Joe Ryan's case and came to the same conclusion they had previously come to, that he had died of natural causes. Alex had also told Zulema a few days earlier that he had a money bag in the closet that was for her in the event that anything happened to him. According to Zulema's testimony on the witness stand, she thought that was weird and she questioned him about it. He just repeated that it was for her. Zulema testified that Alex had been acting strange. He was quiet and unresponsive in the days prior to his death, which was unusual for him. He was normally very active, funny, and liked to talk and joke a lot. All of that might explain why she was concerned when he didn't answer her calls. Also, a few days prior to Alex's death, Chad Daybell gave him a blessing over the phone. Apparently, Chad Daybell passed out a lot of blessings, so I guess we can't read too much into that, but it is a little coincidental, especially since, according to Zulema's testimony, Alex became quiet and unresponsive after that. And this is around the time when he said to Zulema, "I think I'm being their fall guy." When I heard her say that from my seat in the jury box, I thought it was very telling. It kind of put things together for me. I remember thinking at the time, okay, so this is what happened. Chad and Lori had used Alex to do their dirty work. It started to make sense. He was their fall guy, and I think now and thought at the time that he must have had to die because of it. It almost seems like Alex was given permission by Chad Daybell to die. In court, we listened to Chad Daybell's blessing. Chad Daybell calls himself a prophet and a patriarchal member of the Church of the Firstborn. He definitely did not have any authority from the Mormon Church to give blessings. He said to Alex, "You had to go to great depths to achieve tremendous heights, and the fruits of those heights are beginning to be demonstrated. Now you will begin your terrestrial phase of existence. You will be a powerful servant. You will travel all over the world through portals, and you'll begin to gather the souls that come unto Christ." Chad Daybell went on to call Alex a prophet who will be looked upon as an angel on this earth. I don't know who is looking upon him as an angel. I would love to know if anyone is now or was at the time. If we could answer that question, I think we would know who else was either involved or at least aware of the murders before or when they were happening. Alex seemed to have believed in Chad Daybell to some extent. He had to have believed in him to have had him commit the horrible murders he did. But right before he died, I think Alex was questioning his beliefs and wondering if they were true. I wonder if Alex had to die because of that. Alex was definitely involved in Chad Daybell's prepper community and inner circle. He bought into the idea of the second coming of Christ and seems to have believed Chad Daybell when he told Alex that he, Chad, is the prophet and will lead the 144,000. We listened to Zulema on the witness stand telling about the chilling control Chad and Lori had over Alex. Chad told Alex over and over again that Alex had prior probations on the earth. He tells Alex in his patriarchal blessing that he was a valiant warrior, fighting for truth and righteousness and always seeking to do what is right. He tells Alex, "You have already assisted us in ways that we can never be repaid. You will continue to do so as you move forward in this life. You will be known throughout the world for your good-heartedness and your ability to save souls throughout this world through portals. You'll be able to gather the souls who come unto Christ. I see you as a messenger of the Lord." This too is very telling. I think that Chad Daybell is saying to Alex, what he's saying to him is that he saved Tylee and JJ's souls by murdering them, which indicates to me that Alex did believe what Chad and Lori Daybell were telling him. It also tells me without a doubt that Alex was and always had been manipulated by his sister. He seems to finally be catching on right before he died, so he must have died understanding what he had done. Isn't this what we want to have happen right before someone is put to death? When we sentence someone to death, we want them to come to terms with the crimes they've committed. So maybe, in some convoluted way, justice was served on Alex. Not the way we would want it to happen, of course. Chad and Lori manipulated Alex just like Charles Manson manipulated his followers to commit brutal murder. Manson was trying to start a race war that he thought that he would profit from and use drugs and propaganda to bend his followers' minds. Chad and Lori used religion, propaganda, and outright lies to manipulate Alex. They thought they would profit from the murders, gaining money, power, and sex. They convinced him that by committing those murders, he was saving souls. As we see, Alex believed it. He believed it was enough to commit murder. Right up until the day before he died, I think when Alex was faced with his own death, he began to see through all the lies and manipulation, and we hear him questioning what he had done. Still to this day, Alex's death is listed as natural causes. Maybe there is just so much going on in this case that the police just had to pick their battles, so to speak. I do wonder whether Zulema made a deal with the prosecutors. Will she at some point be charged in Alex's death? Did she kill Alex in self-defense, thinking he was trying to murder her? I did ask both Detective Hermosillo and the prosecution team if there might be other charges coming for Chad and Lori, and they both said they didn't think so. Chad is charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder in the deaths of his wife and Lori Daybell's children, JJ and Tylee. There's 3 counts of murder and 3 counts of conspiracy to commit murder. I also asked them if there would be other people charged in the case, and they said no. I think, though, that if they were investigating someone like Zulema, they might not want her to know that, so they would say no. These questions make me really glad that there is a Chad Daybell trial and that he's not able or willing to plead out. I know it would be easier for some of the living victims, but there are just too many questions still out there, and I think a lot of them will be answered during his trial. I also think once his trial is over, the prosecution and the police will be more able to talk about some of these things. Alex Lamar Cox was born on January 18th of 1968 in Provo, Utah, to Barry and Janice Cox. He was Lori Daybell's older brother by about 4.5 years. At the time of his death, he was 6'1" and weighed 210 pounds. His sister Stacy Lynn Cox Cope died at age 31 in 1998. Very few details are known about her death, and later events have raised questions as to whether or not it was natural. Supposedly, she suffered from extreme anorexia and liver disease. Could brother Alex or sister Lori have had something to do with it? Alex was home alone with Stacy when she died. The rest of the family was in Hawaii. This seems to be a common theme. A healthy young person dies of natural causes while people are off in Hawaii. Of course, we know Stacy wasn't healthy, but she should have been. Was she being poisoned? Who knows? We do know that Lori claims to be in contact with her through the spirit world to this day. When Alex and Lori were children, according to a friend of Lori's, Alex kept trying to have sex with Lori, and that would indicate that he was not normal and possibly obsessed with his sister. We don't know if he had successfully molested Lori or not, but given what we do know about the family and Alex and Lori's relationship, I do think it's a very good possibility. A sexual relationship between a brother and sister doesn't happen in normal, healthy family, and I think it points to the idea that Lori's family might have been really messed up. Alex's ex-wife, identified as Debbie, did tell police that Alex had a sexual relationship with Lori and they would engage in inappropriate sexual touching, even in front of other family members. Alex would touch Lori's breasts, and Lori would jump up on Alex and bounce around on him in a sexual manner. Debbie eventually left Alex 1 year after marrying him in 1992, after meeting his family and seeing a strange sex dynamic and openness that scared her and made her feel uncomfortable. Lori and Alex's father, Barry, is also said to have been very domineering and controlling to the point of being psychologically harmful to his family. According to Justin Lum, on September 3rd of 2022, we know Lori's son Kobe was arrested for sexual assault of his wife. He pled guilty and was convicted. This might point to earlier family problems now negatively influencing Kobe's life. Now, I don't think he pled guilty and was convicted of that. Maybe he was. I never heard anything else. Put it in the comments. Was Kobe, did he plead guilty and was convicted of that? Because he's with his wife today, so somebody put it in the comments. I do have to say here that I've had conversations with Alex and Lori's Uncle Rex and Brother Adam. I think they would dispute at least some of what I've written here. In fairness, I have to say that. What I am writing is conjecture based on what other people have told me, and Rex and Adam have conversely told me that the family was really pretty normal. They were loud, outgoing, and funny, and not weird. When I brought up the subject of their family with them, they said they thought people like Debbie might be seeking their moment of fame or have some reason to exaggerate what went on in the Cox family. Adam went on to tell me when I asked about his father Barry, that Barry was really pretty normal. Give me a break, y'all. He was raised to work hard in the old-fashioned sense. I think what Adam was trying to say is that Barry may have been hard in the way one might be when raised to work hard and go ahead on into whatever task he sets his mind on. So domineering in that sense, but not overly so. Adam told me a story of when he was set on going to a playoff football game, but Barry really wanted to go to a movie that Adam had no interest in. Adam was given no choice and had to go with the family. The movie was in a foreign language, and Adam was bored to tears and resentful for missing the football game. This is just one example of Barry being hard on the kids. Mary Tracy, Alex's good friend and fellow stand-up comedian in Phoenix, says she never would have dreamed Alex would do any harm to the kids. He was the cool uncle. Alex wrote to Mary while serving 90 days in prison for attacking Lori's ex-husband, Joe Ryan. She says Alex never felt any remorse for that and felt he was protecting his niece and nephew. He even tried to get Mary to gather information from Lori Ryan's mother, Janice, on Joe Ryan so he would share it with his fellow inmates in the hopes that they would do harm to him. Mary also says Lori Ryan egged Alex on. She says that Lori Ryan manufactured information on Joe and Alex believed her. This points to the idea that Lori started manipulating Alex at a young age, even though Alex was almost 5 years older. Manufacturing stories and manipulating people to do things for her definitely describes Lori. I think she learned early on how to do that, and it shows that she would tell any lies and have people do anything for her to get what she wanted. Alex married Zulema on November 29th of 2019. Apparently, the marriage was arranged by Chad Daybell. Chad Daybell had given Zulema a spiritual message saying she was to marry Alex. This was not uncommon in Chad Daybell's doomsday cult. Strangely, Alex took Zulema's last name. We know that is not the norm. I have no idea why he would have done that, and I'd love to know. Could he have been angry at his parents wanting to hurt them or distance himself from them? The only answer I can come up with is that he didn't like the Cox name. Well, I'll tell you what, y'all. The reason he took her last name is because he was going to go off in hiding. That's what I think. Zulema started to feel strange about Alex not long after they were married. In an interview with Rexburg Police, she described one night with him in a motel. She and Alex went out and bought a painter's drop cloth or tarp to put on the bed. Alex had offered to give Zulema a massage, but she fell into a semi-sleep state, and Alex spent most of the time in the bathroom. She felt like she was in a fog, but could still hear him talking to someone on the phone. Zulema now believes Alex was talking to Chad and Lori, and that Alex was supposed to have killed her that night. I don't know what they might have had to gain by killing her. She believes she was drugged, and that's why she was in the semi-sleep state. Wayne just walked in, y'all. Sorry. Okay. Apparently, at the time, she didn't think much of the incident, but it must have been terrifying for her to think about it later. It also raises a huge question to me as to whether or not drugs were used in the murders. We know JJ had drugs in his system when he was murdered. Dr. Garth Warren, a forensic pathologist, testified to that in court. There's no way to know about Tylee given the condition of her remains. I didn't hear anything about Tammy having drugs in her system when they did the autopsy on her exhumed body, other than a small amount of the medication she was taking for depression. Could Lori have used drugs to kill Joe Ryan? Was she sophisticated enough to know how to do that and get away with it? Same question with Alex. It would be somewhat of a relief to think that JJ and Tylee had been drugged and unable to know they were being murdered by the very people who were supposed to love, protect, and provide for them. I have to say that I wasn't sure what to think of Zulema as she testified in court. She had a kind of a strange way of speaking, and the things she was describing was pretty incredible. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but she also had contradicted her statements to the police given at different times. Still, her testimony in court was mostly believable, and she did have a lot to say. She spent several hours on the stand over 2 days. She would take her time answering questions, pausing for a sip of water, seeming to think over her answer. I know she had testified before the grand jury and had been interviewed repeatedly by the police. She must have been used to it by the time she testified in this trial. She must have had her answers down pat. She certainly seems to have fallen for Chad Daybell's lies. She's definitely one of those people who seems to believe in all the spiritual hocus pocus, and that is what guides her through her life. But back to Alex. The last picture we see of Tylee alive was taken by Lori and shows Uncle Alex with Tylee and JJ in front of Old Faithful at Yellowstone National Park on September 8th of 2019. Alex looked like a normal guy. He looks happy and relaxed, spending time with his niece and nephew. I wonder, though, if there was a purpose behind the picture and the trip to Yellowstone National Park. Early on, while everyone was searching for Tylee and JJ, people thought they may have been murdered in Yellowstone. A lot of time was spent questioning people and even searching for bodies there. One conclusion I can come up to is that the trip was made for the purpose of taking that picture to show a normal, happy family. We know Tylee was murdered that night or early the next day, and the murder was premeditated, so it had to have had something to do with that. Could it have had something to do with drugging Tylee? Could she have been drugged on the way home? Maybe at dinner. Could she have been dead by the time they got her home? It's all conjecture, but I would sure like to know. All we know for sure is that it was Tylee's last trip anywhere, and she looks happy. But she was good at making herself look happy when she was expected to. Anyway, these questions haunt me, and I wish I could get the answers. I want to interview Lori and ask her the 1 in a million chance that she would tell the truth to me. So that's what we know about Alex. As it relates to this case, he had also been a truck driver and didn't seem to be a serious person as far as making something of himself. He was known to travel to Costa Rica where he paid women for companionship. That indicates to me that he might have been socially awkward when it came to women. It would be interesting to talk to some of the women in Costa Rica he spent time with just to see how he was with them. The important part in his relationship was with his sister Lori, and we can see that it was weird. The whole Cox family dynamics is hard for me to understand. Chapter 13, Mining Converts. It takes a mastermind to build a successful cult, someone who has vision and the energy and wherewithal to make it happen, someone who, without flaws in his character, could run a large corporation very successfully or might make a great politician. The ability to gain followers, a charismatic personality, even more than that, someone who people trust implicitly. It also, however, takes someone who's willing to exploit vulnerable people. Usually young, idealistic people who really just think things are messed up and who have a deep desire to make things better. I know that also describes a lot of politicians. We need young, idealistic people in our world, without a doubt, but the problem can sometimes be that they don't have a good understanding from life experience of how the world works. Where does one find this idealistic and gullible person? Jim Jones found them in the ghetto in San Francisco. Warren Jeffs found them in the church. Charles Manson found them in Haight-Ashbury. The Bhagwan found them all over the place. And Chad Daybell found them primarily in the Mormon church. Life as a Mormon can be very stifling, especially in a small Mormon community like Rexburg or many other small towns in Utah and Idaho. As a Mormon, one is expected to dress a certain way and behave in a certain way. Deviating from this will be noticed by your fellow Mormons, and people will talk. There's a hierarchy, and you don't get to move up unless you conform, and moving up has its advantages. Think about high school and the popular kids. Caffeine, alcohol, tobacco, pornography, and masturbation are a big no-no. However, Mormons are still humans, and young adult Mormons in particular are susceptible to the temptations of the outside world. They're curious, and even in isolated and protected communities like Rexburg, they can't help but be exposed to what the rest of the world just accepts as normal. The Mormon Church provides counseling to its members who struggle with any of these things. It has become problematic for the church, though. The counselors who are sanctioned by the church and even paid by the church put religion before what is considered best practices in terms of treatment and what is or is not considered deviant behavior. When Chad Daybell shows up with his charismatic smile and somewhat controversial message, some people are naturally drawn in, especially young women, it seems. To them, it seems to be more worldly and knowing than your average Mormon man. He seems to have the answers to questions they all have, but can't come right out and ask. Chad may be slightly dangerous, but still accepted by the community, at least until his influence started to be too much for the church. Mormon women tend to have their cliques or unofficial clubs. Within these cliques or clubs, they feel safe discussing things among themselves and maybe even pushing the envelope just a little bit. Having Chad Daybell over to give a talk gave them the perfect opportunity to be a little bad without offending the church. They could ask him questions about polygamy, the end of the days, or whatever, and they would feel safe within the clique. And Chad Daybell was more than happy to talk to them. He seems to have loved the attention and the opportunity to promote his books. According to a friend of mine who is Mormon, at least twice a year the church warns its members not to get involved with or join these clubs and cliques. What are the things that motivate people to join cults? Some of the answers are obvious and some are more obscure. Some people believe that the end of the world is coming in their lifetime. Why do they believe this? Common sense says that while the end of the world must surely happen at some point, it probably won't be anytime soon. The chances of it happening during any current living person's lifetime is extremely slim. I think the point of the New Testament is to prepare humanity for the second coming of Christ. Some individuals take that as meaning that they personally need to prepare for the end of the world. It's short-sighted for sure, but we see it over and over again. It's more likely, if you are a Christian, that you will meet your Maker on your own, while the world carries on after you. Realists live their lives on that principle. An idealist can somehow disregard what they see all around them in favor of an idea that is appealing to them. Emotionally, it's easy to let fear of the end of the world or fear of our government guide our actions. After all, our world, the earth, is just a tiny speck, a piece of dust in the universe, like a bug under your feet. It certainly seems possible for something to just randomly destroy it. And our government? Think about what happened in what is commonly known as the Waco Massacre. Another religious cult, the Branch Davidians, led by David Koresh at the Mount Carmel Center in Axtell, Texas, was put under siege by the ATF. Bill Clinton's Attorney General, Janet Reno, sanctioned the raid. Whether on purpose or by accident, the compound caught fire and many of the men, women, and children holed up inside burned to death. Was it mass suicide? Was it murder perpetrated by Koresh? Or was the fire caused by tear gas canisters injected into the building by the ATF? The Branch Davidians were known to have a stockpile of illegal weapons, but the main reason given for the siege was the government said they had evidence of child abuse. They needed to rescue the children. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. The siege started on February 28th of 1993 and continued until April 19th of 1993. The ATF obtained a search warrant for David Koresh, aka Vernon Wayne Howe, and attempted to serve it on February 28. Unfortunately, a local reporter tipped off a U.S. postal employee who happened to be Koresh's brother-in-law. By the time the ATF showed up to serve the warrant, the Branch Davidians were fully armed and prepared for them. 6 Branch Davidians and 4 ATF agents died in the opening volley. The ATF retreated and held the compound under siege for near 51 days while both sides attempted to negotiate a way out of the stalemate. On April 19th, the ATF drove tanks up to the main building and launched tear gas canisters into it. 25 children and 51 adults died in the ensuing fire. To this day, it is unclear what started the fire that killed so many. The ATF claims it fired no live rounds into the building that day, and Koresh had planned the fire. Others, maybe not so trusting of the government, claim live rounds were fired, and those live rounds ignited the flammable tear gas. There is clear evidence that Koresh and his top advisor had fatal head wounds, which would be inconsistent with the claim that the fire caused all of the deaths. Whatever the cause and whatever started the standoff in the first place, the results were disastrous. And it didn't end there. 2 years later to the day, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols bombed a federal building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 innocent people, including 19 children. Later, McVeigh stated he did it in retaliation for the government's actions at Waco. People lost faith in our government during the Vietnam War and the protests in the 1960s. In the Kent State Massacre, 4 college students protesting the war was killed by the Ohio National Guard, and several others were wounded when the National Guard opened fire. Hundreds of thousands of young Americans died in the somewhat questionable war in Vietnam. It's easy to see why people don't trust the government. We're not supposed to trust our government. We're supposed to question our government and hold those in power accountable. That's how our system of government is set up. But does our system of government breed exploitable people? We do seem to have a never-ending supply of them. These cults keep happening. Chad Daybell found his followers mainly in the Mormon church, although he did have others who weren't Mormon. So converts are easy to find. I said before that it merely takes someone willing to exploit vulnerable people, and then it's simple. You set up a premise, the end of the world, government overreach, free love, or whatever. You tell people that you're the only one who can save them or provide that for them. You see who falls for it. Chad wrote books, had podcasts, and would speak at prepper conventions. Prepper conventions are an industry all of their own, promoting self-reliance and survivability in the event of natural disaster, war, disruption of supply chains, etc. At these conventions, people could buy items they would need to survive, buy books giving information on how to survive, and meet people who they might need to coordinate with when the end time came. Since the whole COVID-19 pandemic and the associated problems, prepping had become even more popular. COVID-19 and the government's reaction to it reinforces the idea that something could go terribly wrong to the point where people will need to be prepared and independently able to fend for themselves. And fending for themselves includes being able to defend themselves. The idea is that no one will have what they need to survive, so everyone will turn into thieves. Since you as a prepper have prepared, you'll need to be able to defend yourself and your family against those who were less insightful or less prepared. In other words, you better have a semi-automatic rifle or two and know how to use it. Oh, and plenty of ammunition. I'm not making light of this idea. After all, the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says, as citizens of the United States, we have a right to a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This amendment is not only meant to allow for citizens to protect themselves from each other or from foreign invaders, but also from our own government. Our forefathers meant for it to be a way of keeping our government in check. Some now say that that argument has become ridiculous. After all, our government now has weapons so powerful they could end the world. Again, reinforcing the preppers needs to be prepared. In light of all the mass shootings and gun violence happening in our country, this right to bear arms has become extremely controversial. Of course, the idea that the government could take away the right only serves to further encourage preppers. And in a truly free state like Idaho, which adheres to the constitutional rights of its citizens to carry firearms, good people get to carry guns too. It's not just the criminals walking around with a gun hidden away. I firmly believe that simple fact, the fact that if you break into someone's home, then someone is more likely going to be armed and ready to defend himself or herself and his or her family and property, discouraging criminals from committing crimes. Also, if you do commit that crime in Idaho, you are more likely to be punished for it. Much easier to commit that crime in a state that is more friendly to it. In fact, I would go so far as to say it is the responsibility of all good people who are capable to be the defenders of not only your own property and family, but also your neighbor who may not be in the position to defend himself or herself. Here's an example of what I mean by defending your neighbor. In 2022, 20-year-old Jonathan Saparman opened fire in an Indiana shopping mall food court. He killed 3 totally innocent, unexpecting people and wounded 2 more before a gun-carrying citizen named Elijah Dickens stopped him by shooting him 8 times with his own gun. How many lives did he save? It's impossible to know, but it could have been many. It's a clear-cut example of a bad guy with a gun being neutralized by a good guy with a gun. So, as gun-loving Americans with the Wild West in our hearts, good luck taking away our guns. Not that they won't keep trying. Back to Chad Daybell. Chad had managed to create a following of thousands based mainly on his prepper ideas, but his inner circle was small, typical of a cult leader. To manage a cult, you need others who are willing to go along with you to the point where they're aware of the exploitation and willing to participate for a reason. That reason is the power they acquire within the cult, always given or taken away by the all-powerful leader. Remember the light or dark scale? It was pretty easy to get on the dark scale and very hard to move up on the light scale. And who had the voice of God in his head and the ability to move one up or down on the scale? Chad Daybell, and only Chad Daybell. And could Lori Daybell have been on some level a victim of Chad Daybell, or was this the perfect union of 2 people with the same vision? Lori also believes she spoke with God, or at least that God spoke directly to her. In fact, way back in 2004, she was a contestant on Wheel of Fortune. at least 14 years before meeting Chad. She talked then of hearing the voice of God telling her to go on the show. She won more than $17,000, so I guess it worked out for her. It didn't work out well for her either that same year when she participated in the Mrs. Texas beauty pageant. She fell short and was dropped from the pageant in the early stages. I believe that Lori, Chad, and some of their followers were in on the same scheme, willing to take advantage of people, take their money, and even their lives if necessary. Why? In order to promote their own lives, whether monetarily, for the sake of sex, or for the sake of power. Power moved you up on the light and dark scale, and moving up on the light and dark scale gave you power. Listening to some of the witnesses left me wondering if they had been duped by Chad and Lori, or if they were in on the hoax with Lori. Could some of Chad and Lori's followers have known JJ and Tylee were in danger? Could some of them have known Tammy and Brandon were in danger? Could they have at least had some information that might have helped the police solve the mystery of the disappearance of JJ and Tylee sooner? Some of the witnesses who testified seemed extremely shaky. Not that they were actually shaking on the stand, more like they didn't seem sincere. They didn't seem like the kind of people whose story I could trust. Were they covering their butts, or were they truly ignorant of what was actually happening? The only truly believable witnesses who had been associated with Lori were her sister Summer Shiflett, her son Kobe Ryan, and her ex-sister-in-law Kay Woodcock. Of course, none of them were involved with Chad Daybell or his cult. Lori's niece, Melanie Pulowski, seemed to want her ex-husband Brandon dead, and there is evidence that she was close with Lori and part of their doomsday cult. Melanie claimed it was not a cult and stuck up for Lori. In November of 2019, she was arrested at the home of her ex-husband Brandon and convicted of criminal trespass. Her father-in-law was in the house at the time and feared for his life as Melanie beat on the door between the house and the garage. He was aware of some of the crimes already committed by the cult and that they had said certain people were zombies and needed to die, so he called the police. Alex was with her at the time, but he was outside sitting in the truck when police arrived. I have a hard time believing that some of the witnesses hadn't known something that at least could have helped the police figure things out and possibly could have kept events from unfolding the way they did. Melanie Gibb, a close friend of Lori since the two met in 2018, testified in court, and her testimony was pretty damning for Lori. Melanie Gibb and Lori had changed after, said Lori had changed after she met Chad Daybell. Melody didn't go along with the things Lori Daybell was saying about zombies and the idea that JJ was possessed. She didn't go along with Lori's idea that she and Chad Daybell had been married in previous lives, and that's, y'all, I guess that's his opinion. Because she's doing these castings. She knows good and damn well. Melanie Gibb knows all about these freaking damn zombies and demons. And then this whole bullshit here about that she didn't go along with Chad and Lori being married in previous lives. Well, her name was freaking Phoebe. So, I mean, this guy, he's obviously got his opinions, y'all. But the Melanie Gibb is the worst of the worst, aside from Chad and Lori and Alex. It's just aggravating that they did not put Melanie Gibb in jail. Okay, well, let's move forward. She became suspicious and actually recorded a phone call between her and Lori on December 8th of 2019, and that phone call was played in court. In the phone call, Lori says the kids are okay, but won't tell Melanie where they are. Where is he? I've been asking where he is, Gibbs said on the phone call, referring to JJ. And Lori answered, I could tell everything where JJ is right now, and that would be not good for JJ. Lori also said JJ was possessed by an evil spirit and would crawl up on top of the refrigerator and cabinets. She said he knocked over and broke a picture of Christ. We know JJ had autism, but crawling up on the refrigerator and cabinets still sounds a little extreme. It seemed that Lori was trying to justify something. In the phone call, Lori keeps reiterating that JJ is safe, but people are after him. When Gibbs keeps questioning Lori and Chad, Chad just tells her they aren't saying anything where JJ is in order to keep Gibbs safe. And Gibb asks why she would be in danger and who would be after JJ, but she keeps getting vague answers. Still, we clearly hear both Chad and Lori lie to her. And you know what, folks? I want to say this again. Melanie Gibb knew what she knew, and Lori and Chad knew what Melanie Gibb knew. So no matter what Melanie Gibb said on that recorded call, Lori and Chad wasn't going to give it up to Melanie. They weren't going to say, Lori and Chad were not going to say, Melanie Gibb, you know good and dang well. Why? Because that would implicate Lori and Chad. So they went along with all that. They knew Melanie Gibb was recording that at some point. They knew by the way she was talking, because she was talking because she knew the recording was going to get to police, and she knew that she had to try to make it look like she knew nothing about anything that was going on. And y'all, Lori and Chad was not going to say on that recording that Melanie Gibb knew everything all along, because that would implicate Lori and Chad, you see? So it was just a fake recorded call from all three of them, really, in my view. I don't think Lori and Chad knew she was going to do it, but they went along with it and pretended they didn't know nothing. And they also said everything they wanted to say, knowing that recording would get to police, by saying JJ's safe and all that, just to keep everybody guessing. When Lori's attorney, John Thomas, cross-examined Melanie, we found out that Melanie had taken part in some of the castings out of Devils and Evil Spirits. Melanie explained that she thought it was innocent. Melanie seemed to me to be a person who was initially taken in by Chad and Lori. She may have been a little charmed by them, but eventually realized they might be a little too far out there for her. Still, she was a very close friend to Lori, and I think she was shocked and offended that Lori wouldn't tell her where the kids were, even before she knew they had been murdered and buried in Chad's backyard. And again, this is his views, y'all. Y'all know where old KJ stands. Melanie is definitely one of the people I wonder about. Did she know about at least some of Lori and Chad's crimes? Was she involved in any of them? Is she covering for herself? We at least know that at some point she decided to cooperate with the police, but was that in order to keep herself out of trouble? Maybe we'll never know. Some of the most chilling testimony, I thought, came from Zulema, a close friend of Lori's, who, as I said earlier, eventually married Lori's brother Alex in Las Vegas in November of 2019. She seems to hold nothing back on the witness stand, and besides the police, seemed to be one of the few witnesses who believed Lori was guilty and wasn't taken in by her. Of course, she was taken in by Lori Daybell originally, and she was definitely a convert. But by the time she took the witness stand, she was clearly fully aware of what Lori had done to the kids. And again, y'all, these are his views. Zulema went on. She talked to Lori about, I'm going to the temple so we can get rid of Ned Schneider. She egged Lori and Chad and Alex on, just as Melanie Gibb and the rest of them damn cult members did. Zulema's testimony started with Alex's shooting of Lori's ex-husband, Charles Vallow. I asked him, Alex, if he was okay after he had just shot someone. I thought he would be like in shock or struggling with what had happened. And he said, Zulema, he was a zombie. Zulema testified that Alex believed everything Lori told him. It's hard to swallow, but if this is true, it's really sad. She said Lori was convincing and vivacious and had a very high spiritual standing. Lori told her she had been visited by Jesus and had visitations by angels, including Moroni. The most damning testimony came when Zulema described Lori's explanation about how possessed people were to be dealt with. Dispel, burn, cast out, and get rid of them. Also, binding. Tylee had been burned, and JJ was bound with duct tape. Zulema went on to say that Chad claimed he had been Heavenly Father Jesus and the Holy Ghost, and he and Lori had been 7 times on this earth. On the witness stand, Zulema said they made it all up, but my feelings is that she believed it all at the time. She said she originally thought they were kind, loving, law-abiding, and righteous. She went on to say she had gone with Lori to a Preparing a People conference. She said when Lori met Chad, she immediately started flirting and putting the moves on him. Lori told Zulema that ex-husband Charles was possessed by a dark spirit or demon named Garrett, and she could see that Charles had gotten shorter. Apparently, his being shorter was supposed to support the argument that he was possessed. Zulema attended multiple castings to cast out the evil spirit, Garrett. She said it was a group of girlfriends holding hands in a circle, and it seemed pretty innocent. But after that, according to Lori, Charles was taken over by Ned Schneider, an even more powerful spirit. Apparently, there's a window of a few minutes when, after a casting, a new spirit can enter one's body. As we saw earlier, Alex had told Zulema at one point that he thought he was being their fall guy, so he must have had some understanding of what he had done. I think I am being their fall guy. Either I am a man of God or I am not, is what he said. Lori told Zulema that Tammy had passed away because they were finally able to do a casting of a demon. Lori also told Zulema that Rexburg was going to be a place where they would be soldiers and warriors that would be defending that area, and the area had been prepared by the church. I think they were lying to me, Zulema unbelievably said on the witness stand, indicating she might still have some questions. What do we make of Zulema? Extremely gullible for sure, looking for answers where there are no answers, at least not any that we're meant to find. Idealistic to an extreme degree, but does that make her a criminal? Does she know what Chad and Lori were up to early enough to have stopped events from unfolding the way they did? I don't know. Back to the question of how does one find converts? As I said earlier, Chad found them primarily in the Mormon Church, but why would the Mormon Church be a good place to find people willing to go along with his premise? His premise was that the world was coming to the end on July 22nd of 2020. He was in direct contact with God, and he would lead his chosen people to the promised land. The Mormon Church does espouse that the prophet or prophets do have a direct connection to God and gets visions and messages directly from God. The idea of prophets in the Mormon Church is a little unclear to me. The president of the church is a prophet. There have been 17 presidents since the origination of the Mormon Church, starting, of course, with Joseph Smith in 1830. Can someone other than the president be a prophet? Technically, I would say no, but there had been many who have claimed they were prophets. If Chad Daybell could convince some people he's a prophet, it's not a huge stretch to believe he's getting messages from God. And if he's getting messages directly from God, one had better listen. I'll admit, it's a stretch, but actually that's the point. Again, if you find people gullible enough to believe your lies, you have at least the beginning of a cult. You start with people who go along with your premise, and you keep adding on with half-truths and sound somewhat believable. Play to their fears and insecurities. Convince them that danger is coming from somewhere, and then convince them to follow you. You have the answers they are looking for. As you gain true believers, move them into positions of power and allow them to benefit from that power. And they will back up your lies, furthering others' belief in you. Even so, that will never explain how a mother, her brother, and a stepfather murdered their children. Lori and Alex had to have truly believed what Lori and Chad were espousing. The world was coming to an end. The children's bodies were invaded by zombies and were already dead. And the only way their souls could be released and sent to heaven would be to cast out the zombies by killing the bodies. But that contradicts the prosecution's argument that it was all about money, power, and sex. So was it money, power, and sex, or was it the end of the world? Well, the end of the world didn't happen. At least not when Chad Daybell said it would. July 22nd of 2020 has come and gone. So I guess we'll go with money, power, and sex. Either way, Lori Daybell needs to spend the rest of her life in prison. Hopefully someday the truth will come to her, and that would be better justice to me than the death penalty. All right, y'all. Leave your comments. At the end of the week, I'm gonna be getting all these comments together. We're gonna discuss it in a book review at the end of the week. Thank y'all all for participating in all this. We are going to get justice through understanding and keep on looking.